Hello and a very warm welcome to this month's Pacecast. I'm Anita Pace. Thank you for joining us. And it is a very warm welcome because we're recording this in mid-June. The temperatures are soaring and we're basking in a heat wave. It is literally getting hot in here, but I'm going to resist the temptation to burst into song. So I won't subject you to that. So let's get on with it and I'd like you to introduce you to our guest this morning. I need to concentrate because she's got a very long job title. Let me get it right. So she is the Executive Director of Communications, Marketing and Media Relations for NHS Humber and North Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. I think I've got that right. We'll learn more about what all that means, but I'm delighted to welcome to the studio this morning the lovely Anja Hazebroek. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I hope you've brought in an object. This object should be special or meaningful to you. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you've brought and why it's so special to you.
Yeah.
So over to you.
Okay. So I've brought in a medal that is nearly 20 years old now, and it is for completing the Great North Run.
Well done.
And you might think, well, why is that relevant to, I don't know, me, my career, my journey? And it symbolises a few things, really. So at the time, I was working in one of the former city regeneration organisations. It was actually City Build at the time. As you can probably tell, I'm not a natural runner. I'd never ran, but there were a number of us that really wanted to sort of build our fitness, etc. And one of our colleagues at the time sort of set up a bit of a running club for us, and it was absolutely brilliant in terms of just bringing everybody together of all abilities, just to have a bit of fun and sort of socialise out of work, but obviously to get to the goal of actually being able to run at a distance, as it were. And we started off, I think we did like the one of the 5K races, Race for Life or something, and then we did the whole 10K. But I really had an ambition to do a much longer race, and so put in for the Great North Run.
Which is a half marathon.
Yeah, which is a half marathon. Yeah. I'd never done that level of race or run before. And again, you know, even after a level of coaching, let's say, I still wasn't the greatest runner. And I was really sort of anxious about, am I actually going to be able to run that distance? But I did run it, obviously, because I've now got the medal for it. But what it really signified for me, and it was at a sort of midpoint in my career, if you like, it symbols for me the fact that if you know, it sounds really cheesy, but if you dream it, you can achieve it. If you really put your mind to it, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve. But more so, if you've got the support of a really great team and really great colleagues, and you find the different strengths in each other and support each other to sort of unlock some of those strengths and some of the potential. Again, of course, I'm never suddenly going to be Paula Radcliffe, but it just symbolises that for me, and working with a really, really special team at the time. So that's why I brought this in.
Thanks for sharing the story. I'm curious, did it ignite a passion for running? Have you been running since? Any more half marathons?
I did another half marathon a few years later. It was the Humber half marathon, and but I never really did the distance running. I would have liked to have done a marathon, but just couldn't really commit to the training. I don't know, never say never. I might do it at some point. Okay.
Well, thanks again for bringing that in. Right, let's dial it right back then to the beginning. So tell us about your childhood, when you were growing up, and how you did you at any point in those early days know what you wanted to do? Talk to us about that.
So I'm an only child. I was born in Beverley at Beverley Westwood Hospital, which I think gives some right of the Westwood pasture, I've recently been told.
Did not know that.
Yeah, something. There's some sort of story there. I'll have to remember what it is. But yes, I was born in Beverley Westwood Hospital. As you can probably tell, my name isn't typical East Yorkshire. So my mum was from East Hull. My dad was from the Netherlands and came over to work in the area and met my mum. And I spent the very early part of my childhood actually actually moving around because of my dad's work. So for a time he worked for, I guess, a former version of Yorkshire Water, and we were based at Top Hill Low Nature Reserve out near Driffield, and then we actually spent a little bit of time over in the Netherlands, albeit I can't remember it because I was so young. And then we moved to the wonderful town of Goole. Again, primarily because of my dad's work. Unfortunately, in my childhood, my father left and left me and my mum. So, she was a single parent for many years, and my dad was pretty much absent for a lot of my childhood.
And how old were you being then?
I would have been about 4 or 5.
Oh, so still young.
Quite young, yeah. And I guess, but my childhood, it was a wonderful childhood, and I obviously had a very close relationship with my mother. Didn't have a lot of money. We lived in a council house, but it was fine. It was what I knew, and I still have very fond memories of my childhood, really, because we lived in a really strong, supportive community. My mum tried to do as much as possible to sort of build new sort of networks, connections, if you like, and so had that support and had the opportunity to get involved in different sort of community activities, etc. So that was really nice, actually, from my childhood perspective.
And what was school? What were you like at school? Did you enjoy school?
I enjoyed school, albeit some people say, school's the best days of your life. I really wouldn't say school was the best days of my life. So, I enjoyed it. But I wouldn't say the best days of my life. I was quite competitive at school, and particularly at primary school. I attended a Church of England primary school in one of the villages near Hook. And at the time, we used to have sort of religious education lessons, and the vicar at the time was quite a forceful character. Everybody was terrified of him. It was, this is going back obviously 45 years or 40 years. So, and where the village is located is right next to the River Ouse, and there's an island in the middle of the Ouse called Bird Island that those, anybody watching or listening familiar with the area will know. And he used to tell us this story of that there was a secret tunnel underneath the church, because the church is very old, that came out on Bird Island. And he said, if anybody ever gets 100% in the religious education test, I'll show them the tunnel. Obviously, you probably wouldn't do that sort of thing nowadays. But anyway, so of course I thought, well, I'm going to get 100% in the religious education.
You want to see the tunnel?
Yeah, which I did. And I never saw the tunnel, and it sort of, I don't mean it scarred me, I'm being flippant about it, but I was really, really annoyed that I thought, no, I'm going to get this 100%, and I don't actually know if the tunnel existed, but I certainly didn't see it.
Naughty vicar.
I know.
So when you say you're competitive, were you academic? Did you?
Yes, I would say more academic. I certainly wasn't sporty, but quite academic. Yeah.
Okay, so you did well at school, presumably, even though it wasn't the best time of your life, as you said. But school was fine. And then what happened after school? Did you go straight into uni, or did you?
I went to college and university. Right. I went to university in Hull, but it was Humberside at the time. And I actually went a little bit, I don't know if I was a tiny bit rebellious around that time. And I was quite academic, as I say, and there was quite a lot of expectation around, what are you going to do next? And I really didn't have a clue what I wanted to do.
So what were you studying at uni?
Well, I'll come on to that. Okay. So when I went to college, actually, my best friend at the time was doing a BTEC in travel and tourism. And so I just thought, do you know what, I'm going to do that. And you can imagine there was a little bit of my mum thinking, oh my God, why on earth are you doing a BTEC in travel and tourism? Nothing against doing a BTEC in travel and tourism, but I think they expected me to do something a little bit more academic.
And it's funny, isn't it, how you're influenced by your friends, what they're doing.
Yeah, but it was almost a bit of rebellion almost in a way. So then then I actually did a tourism degree at university, which was the same really as the business studies degree.
Yeah.
It just had the slant to tourism, but I did French as well as part of that degree because I was really interested in languages. And the university course was absolutely brilliant, and I spent a semester actually in France attending university in Lille, and I also did work experience at the equivalent of the Imperial War Museum in the Somme. In France, in northern France, which was a fantastic experience.
I bet.
Really good.
So you can speak fluent French then?
I used to be able to speak passable French. It has weakened over time. It does come back a bit if I go on holiday there.
Uni. Then what? While you were doing your university course, did you think, right, I want to pursue this particular route, career-wise, or were you, when you graduated, were you still thinking, I'm not quite sure where I want to go?
I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to be, and ironically, the real sort of drive that I had at the time is that I wanted to travel, work overseas, probably use my language. I wanted to get as far away from this area as I could, not because I didn't like it, just because I had that wanderlust, if you like, and I really wanted to move away and see the world and experience different cultures, and actually because I'd enjoyed the experience of working in France, I really wanted to continue with that pathway really, and for one reason or another, it didn't really work out that way.
So what happened then? What happened after uni?
Straight after university, actually, and my children in particular laugh about this because I'm sure you were the same when you finish uni, you're looking at different sort of graduate opportunities. And I actually got a sort of a place on a trainee programme with a hotel hotel chain, but it was in finance, and I lasted less than 2 weeks because I absolutely hated it. I'd actually enjoyed doing accountancy and what have you as part of my degree, but actually, and I think the part that I hated about it was there was absolutely no atmosphere in the office. Of course, in those days, everybody was in the office, so it was really quiet. You could hear the pin drop, and I was like, this isn't for me. It just felt really, really stifling, and I thought, no, I'm going to get out now. And I actually then got a role on the graduate scheme at, I don't know if you'll remember, Alda's department store. There used to be one in the centre.
Where Primark is now.
Yeah, where Primark is now. And that was a real game changer because I absolutely loved working in retail, and I guess it was working with people, the really dynamic environment, really focused on sales targets, etc. And that was much more me. And it was particularly the sort of sales and marketing side that I really enjoyed, and that's where my career sort of then led me, really.
Yeah. So you almost stumbled across marketing then as part of that. Yeah. So how long were you at Alders for then?
About 2 years, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you decided to move on?
Yeah. And then I had a sort of career journey really in this region, and going back to what I said earlier about my desire was always to go far and wide, really. Again, it was more because of my personal circumstances, and my mum's health in particular wasn't particularly great, so I didn't want to leave her. And unfortunately, she then passed away quite suddenly when I was in my early 20s.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So you didn't want to, after her passing, move after that then? You didn't see that as an opportunity to...
No, again, because of the sort of family situation, my father had actually sort of come back into our lives, so to speak. And yeah, it was just a bit of a strange time really, where you've sort of got this push and pull of you sort of want to go further away, but then you've now got these things that are sort of more local that you maybe want to... the connections, the family connections, the friendships, some of the, I'd started my career and there was a bit of a opportunity developing to stay here. Yeah. So, it was more by circumstance and driven primarily by the personal situation that kept me here. Yeah. And then, after Alders, I went to the East Riding Council, but it was actually a very sort of early version, if you like, of the Hull and East Yorkshire Tourism Association, basically, and it
so
was
still
leading
that link
the marketing
to tourism
for that. Yeah. And it was the link to tourism again there. Yeah.
Okay, and then you moved on from there. Was that when you went to? You tell me where you went, because there's been a few places.
So after that, again, following the tourism link, I actually went to Humberside Airport after that, and I was the communications and marketing lead at the airport. And again, it was a really fantastic, it was a fantastic role, and it was a really fantastic time to be there, because it was also bought by the Manchester Airports Group. So then we were doing a lot of work with East Midlands Airport, Manchester Airport, and the teams obviously within those airports and the wider group, and that was it was just really, and for being still fairly young at the start of your sort of career, just the connections that were made, the opportunities, so a lot of travel, both in this country and obviously overseas, was heavily involved in developing routes from the airport, so working with some of the airline operators, holiday companies, etc. So it just felt quite, I suppose, sort of glamorous. Really.
I was going to say glamorous.
Yeah. It was a really nice time.
Even though you were still here, based locally, you were kind of scratching that travel itch through your work, getting the opportunity to travel that way. Which clearly worked well for you. So after the airport?
Well, there's a bit of a story at the airport, as it were. And I guess it goes back to that desire to travel. And what I should have said is, when I was at university, my best friend at university had been on a sort of placement out in Australia. And she decided to travel to Australia with a number of our other friends at the end of university. I didn't make that decision, again, for personal reasons, and Kerry ended up actually emigrating to Australia and setting up a life there. And I'd always, and this was after my mum had passed away, and I always really regretted not doing something like that. And again, at the time, Manchester Airports Group were really keen on sabbaticals and allowing people to obviously go off and do whatever wanted to find themselves, do what they wanted to do. So I took a 6-month sabbatical with my partner, who's now my husband, and did a bit of travelling around the world. So that was really great. And again, but again, as part of that experience, I had the surprise, let's say, in Australia. I was very, very ill in Australia, and I had the surprise of finding out I was pregnant.
Do you know
while
what?
I was
You
there.
were going to say that. So our lives are so similar. Hearing your story, because something similar happened to me, but this isn't about me; it's about you. Yeah. So carry on then. So you, delighted,
we went
no doubt.
out as 2 and came back as 3. We were delighted, but slightly overwhelmed, given that we didn't have anything. We didn't have a house. We didn't have, a washing machine or any of the things that you would need to properly start a family and become an adult, because I didn't really see myself as a proper adult at that time. So did you come home earlier than planned then? Just from your
slightly
earlier.
Right.
I think it was about 5 months rather than the 6 months. And we cut out, we were supposed to do a part of America, and we didn't. We just ended up doing New York on the way back, which was still obviously very nice. So we came back, and again, it was the piece that brought us back to Goole, because my husband's family is from Goole. I didn't have any family at that time. My father had also sadly passed away. So it just felt important, given that neither of us knew what we were doing with a baby.
To have some family support.
To have some family support,
I know that feeling as well. Okay, so you came home, and did you go back to the airports because you were on sabbatical?
Yeah.
Right.
I went back to the airport, and then probably about a year after that, a role came up in it was City Image at the time.
City Image,
the former or the first, if you like, sort of city place marketing company, and the organisation that founded Bondholders, which I'm still involved with, and I'm sure we'll come on to that a little bit later. It was a PR and media manager role. I remember it well, and I applied and was successful in gaining that role. And again, absolutely, a brilliant time in my life, just working with that really small but really motivated, creative, high-performing team, and working with many different partners, obviously within the city, the region, nationally and indeed internationally. It was a brilliant time. And then from there, again, for anybody that remembers a bit of the history in the Humber, that organisation sort of merged with City Build which was the regeneration company, and then morphed into Hull Forward, which again was a sort of inward investment organisation, a bit of a arm's length body to Yorkshire Forward at the time. So a number of years in those city companies, as we call them.
Yeah, so that was quite an how many years would that have been?
Oh gosh, was it about 7 or 8 years, something like that?
As it evolved.
Yeah.
I do remember it all. Yeah. And did you go from there to Vivergo?
I did, yeah. So the writing was on the wall for the quangos, as they were called at the time. I think it was when it was the election where the coalition government came in. I think it was part of the Conservatives' manifesto that they'd said they would abolish, I love that word, abolish all the quangos. And so we knew as soon as obviously the new government was forming that the writing was on the wall. But again, it was a really pivotal point in terms of how you treat people well, and how you really continue to deliver against a cause, if you like, a purpose, even when you know the writing's on the wall. And it was so special being in that organisation up until literally the day we closed the door, because nobody's enthusiasm waned. The work, there wasn't a sort of lull in the work. Everybody was so committed to doing the best for this region and to hand over the work to the City Council and other people that were taking it on. It was just a really fantastic experience. But yes, we shut the doors and then was sort of looking out for the next opportunity, and it came about at Vivergo, which at the time was a joint venture between BP, ABF and DuPont.
Right, yeah, okay. And your role there, you're still in communications?
Yeah, it was communications, and it was in the sort of early days of the setup of Vivergo. So yes, it was communications, but it was much broader than that. So it was, I guess, everything from, OD, cultural development, establishing teams, establishing ways of working, and then it sort of morphed more into a public affairs and an advocacy role. Particularly at the time, we were in essence lobbying, because all of these bioethanol plants in Europe.
Yeah, just explain for the benefit of listeners and viewers Vivergo.
Yes,
what they do.
So Vivergo produces bioethanol and animal feed. Obviously, very topical at the moment because of some of the implications of the trade deal with the US. But at the time, these plants were established across Europe because of the drive to cleaner fuel and the delivery of what was known, or I think still is known, as E10, which means that 10% of the petrol that you put in your car comes from sustainable sources, i.e. biofuel. But a byproduct of the process is also really high protein animal feed, which benefits the agricultural sector as well. But at the time, there was a wobble on policy implementation, let's say. So all these, billions of investment had been put in to set up these plants across Europe, and then they wavered and didn't actually implement the directive for E10. So a lot of the work was actually around lobbying UK government and European Parliament around the implementation of E10. So I spent a lot of time at DFT in London and a lot of time in Brussels.
Yeah. Very different role for you then.
Yeah,
compared to what you've been doing previously.
Yeah.
Enjoy it?
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Yeah, and again, it satisfied a bit of the wanderlust because I was in Brussels probably at least 2 or 3 times a month going on the Eurostar over to Brussels. Ironically, it was the one point that I thought, I might actually get to use my French now. But no, because everybody speaks English and that's the common language. So I actually chaired the bioethanol producers communications network. And so, there were colleagues from Spain, the Netherlands, Germany, but we all
spoke English.
English was the common language used. So, yeah.
So from there you went into education?
Yeah, so my next move was to the University of Hull. And I'm sure you're picking up a theme here that certainly I'd sort of established my family roots in this region now. I'd actually had my son by this point as well.
Child,
so the family had grown a little bit. And from, again, my time in the city companies and even at Vivergo, it became really important to me around having purpose in my role, and particularly when I was at Vivergo, because of the connections with BP, ABF, DuPont, obviously major multinational companies, there were lots of opportunities to probably go more into routes associated with those organisations. But I wasn't really motivated by money, in essence. It was purpose that motivated me, and by that point, even though my desire for travel will never wane, I don't think, I had become a lot more committed to this region and was really passionate about wanting to do or try and be in roles that actually made a difference to this region. So yes, my next move was to the University of Hull, where when I first went there, I was Director of Marketing and Communications, and then I took over responsibility for student recruitment as well.
Which is a big gig as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you were at the uni for quite a few years. So anything stand out for you specifically?
Absolutely, yeah. And it was a fantastic experience being at the university. And I joined after some quite significant changes in the HE sector, primarily that it had become commercialised in essence. And hence why, a role like mine was important. And it was interesting, really, really interesting in terms of the sort of internal culture, because there was a lot that we had to do to change that, because historically students had just arrived at university without having to do anything, but suddenly it was a very competitive market. And obviously for a number of academic colleagues, that was really difficult for them to understand, because in the nicest possible way, they never had to work to get students through the door.
I've always thought that about universities, because you've got this juxtaposition of the academics, but then the commercial, and they're two very different cultures almost.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was really interesting, and I always remember at the beginning I'd used the C word, which is customer.
Right,
obviously. And it was almost like, we don't have customers, and there was this real pushback. And one of my wins that I like to think about during that time is that we did absolutely get more into that language of customer, what are the needs of the students that are coming to us, and so that was really important. And I guess very much linked to that was establishing an evidence-based recruitment strategy, because again, and this is really difficult, I completely understand, for many people in higher education to think about, it's really important every university has a history department, as an example. But actually, if very few people are studying history and want to study history anymore, it doesn't make sense for many universities to have a history department, as difficult as that is. And so we did a huge piece of market intelligence work that informed the strategy, the recruitment strategy at the time for the university, around really understanding student preferences and where the market would be and how we aligned the
also,
strategy to the market.
I just remember the university being more visible in the business community and more engaged with what was going on locally.
Absolutely. And again, at the time, and I'm sure it is the same now, that role of being what we called an anchor institution was really, really crucial. And absolutely, the university is so integral to both the positioning of the region, but also the success of the region and those multiple connections, collaborations that could be made. So it was a conscious effort to be more externally focused rather than internally focused. And I guess as another part of that, and again, what I believe is a real success of my time there was brokering the relationship with Team GB because we were the first only university to broker that relationship. And I always remember being in the Team GB offices in London, and it was literally like a meeting of minds, a meeting of values. Everything that was important to them was what was important to us. And of course, as you can imagine, they had what could be perceived as much better academic institutions wanting to partner with them. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to the university. I just mean in terms of, the ones at the very top end of the league table. But no, they wanted to work with us because of that connection with values. And I believe that, again, that partnership is still in place.
Yeah, congratulations, because I know you were instrumental in that. So.
Yeah, thank you. And that was also a really important partnership for one of the other key ambitions and key successes that we had at the time at the university, and that was around being a really inclusive university. And in particular, we worked really hard with other education providers and partners around the city and around the region to widen access to university, because we have so many, or we had, I'm sure it's still the same, we had so many young people and indeed mature people that just had never thought that university was an option for them. And so we had a huge programme to raise aspirations and support progression into university. And at the time I was there, we were rated as one of the best in the country around widening access for students that wouldn't ordinarily come to university, which we were really, really proud of, and I'm still really proud of. And in particular, and I believe, again, this is still happening, and actually links to my next role, really. We did a lot of work, and there was a certificate pathway at the university to allow people to get onto some of the health degree programmes, so things like midwifery, some of the social care programmes, so the nursing programmes, and you didn't need a GCSE to get onto that pathway.
Oh, really?
And honestly, it's working on that programme is one of the most inspiring times of my entire career, because it just, working with people in our region who I always remember there was a woman that was working on the till at Tesco in Scunthorpe, I think it was actually, and she just had never ever thought that university or becoming a nurse was a possibility for her, and she just didn't have the confidence. She'd been told all her life almost that she wasn't good enough, and she came and she conquered, as it were, and she got that degree, and became a nurse, and it's absolutely brilliant. And that was, again, that's something that I'm so passionate about, and particularly in this region where we have so many people that have been told that they can't, and actually they can, they really can, and particularly during my time at the university, I saw it on a daily basis of, it sounds a bit cheesy, but just the potential that was unlocked by and through people that just didn't think that those opportunities were available for them was just unbelievable, really.
Oh, what a lovely story.
Yeah.
There's probably many of those.
And it's just that one, that came to mind, really, because, and just, and how proud she was. And again, how, again, no disrespect to working on the till at Tesco, but that wasn't her purpose in life.
It's not what she wanted to do. And if it hadn't been for your department, the marketing, communicating that was a possibility, she would have never known.
No, exactly. And of course, there was a huge amount of work by academic colleagues and other colleagues to put the programmes together. But absolutely, in terms of getting that message out. Yeah.
So a good segue into your next role then, NHS. So they came knocking.
Yes. So I joined the NHS 3 years ago now with, at the time, the newly formed Integrated Care Board.
So for the people like me, explain what this ICB thing is. Because the NHS is this massive organisation, which I'm sure a lot of people just don't understand.
No, and even those working within the NHS sometimes don't understand it. And understandably, as members of the public, we just see the NHS and assume it's all one thing, and it isn't. But no, integrated care boards were established 3 years ago. There's 42 of them currently in the country, and they have oversight for spend and performance for the NHS in a particular region. So for our region, it's Humber and North Yorkshire. So we're responsible for just shy of £4 billion of NHS spend and supporting the 1.8 million people that live in our area.
Geographically, are we talking, say, Scarborough, around York, around... You tell me, I'm just visualising.
It might be easier to explain in terms of local authority areas. Yeah. So we cover 6 local authority areas and work very, very closely with those local authority partners. So that's North and North East Lincolnshire, Hull and East Yorkshire, York and North Yorkshire. There are just some areas right at the top of North Yorkshire that actually go into our partner ICB, which is West Yorkshire, but the majority of North Yorkshire
big area then.
In our patch, a huge area, we're the second largest in the country by geography.
Wow. So you're travelling again, but closer to home. So what does your role currently entail then?
So I guess some of it is as it says on the tin almost, but I sit on the board, obviously, and so a key part of my role is around working both with the leadership team, the executive leadership team within the ICB, but more so across the system. And when we say the system, it's with our provider partners, with VCSE, with local authority, voluntary community social enterprise, to enact our strategy, which is to improve the population health outcomes, particularly in parts of our area and unfortunately more acutely in some parts of the Humber region. There are significant health inequalities and disparities. We have too many people that are spending too many years in poor health. We have too many people that are dying prematurely. We have too many people that can't access the services they need. And so that is a key focus of our collective work to try and improve the services and the outcomes for our population.
So that's a big brief.
It's massive, it's huge, and it's not something that can be done overnight. No. And, a key part of that, as I sort of touched on in working with those wider partners, is, a lot of those wider determinants of health are not actually within, anywhere near the control of the NHS. No. So it's really important that we work together almost as a movement, really, to look at what can be done to address some of those significant challenges. So, really, the actual communications, marketing and media side of the role is actually probably quite small in the context of everything else.
So give us an idea then of what a typical day in your life, a working day, is currently.
That's a good question.
Lots of meetings.
Yeah, as with any big organisation, a lot of meetings, albeit I've always been really disciplined in, unless somebody can tell me why I'm needed at a meeting. Obviously, there are, I'm a member of the board, so I can't, choose not to attend the board, and I wouldn't. But for most of the meetings, unless it's clear why I'm needed and the role I'm going to play, I try to be quite disciplined in terms of thinking, do I really need to be in that meeting? Could somebody else be there, or does it even need to be a meeting? So I like to sort of adopt that type of approach anyway, because we all spend far too much time in meetings. However, yes, there is a lot of time spent in meetings. I touched on the fact that we've got a really broad geography, but really having regular catch-ups with my team is really, really important to me. Try to do that in person, but again, we're spread about. So it could be that I'm going into one of our offices. I primarily tend to go into our office at Willoughby or at York. We'll try and make some time to just catch up with my direct team members, because that's always really important to me.
How many people are you responsible for?
So we've got 23 in the team. Team. So typically a mix of meetings, connecting with people, getting out and about across the patch. As an example, later today we've got a significant community engagement event in Goole, ironically, because that's where I live, and that's talking about the hospital and some potential opportunities to further consider and develop hospital services in Goole, but more so to really understand the needs of the population in respect of how we can better support their health and well-being.
So the NHS, there's no escaping. It's in the news most days for different reasons. Lots of challenges, always. Forever, as long as I can remember, the NHS has always had challenges. So when I think about your role, what keeps you awake at night? I mean, there's probably a long list of things you could say to that, but is there anything specifically?
Yeah, there are a number of things that quite literally at the moment keep me up at night. So you may be aware that parts of the NHS are undergoing significant change, and where an area of the NHS that is undergoing significant change, it was announced a few months ago that ICB's integrated care boards needed to make 50% cuts by the end of this financial year. It was actually by the end of Q3.
And the financial year runs from when to?
April.
Right, okay.
Starts at April, runs to the end of March. So that is the key thing that keeps me awake at night, because it's so important to me that any sort of change is done well and that people are supported appropriately through that change. In parts of my career in the past, I've been responsible, I guess, for really significant change programmes, and that's always been my driver, that you can never over-communicate, and you take people with you and you treat people fairly, with kindness, with dignity, with respect. And so that absolutely keeps me up at night, because we don't yet fully know how this is going to be implemented and the impact that it's going to have on people. But of course, all our people are in an extreme state of anxiety around the future, and not just their personal obviously situation in terms of how am I going to pay the mortgage, am I going to have a job, but very genuinely, colleagues genuinely and deeply care about the population that we serve, and so there's a real anxiety of, well, who's going to do this work and what is the impact going to be on the people we serve. And so that is the primary worry. Of course, as a leader in the NHS, I don't think I would be human if I wasn't concerned about some of the significant pressures in the NHS and how people, unfortunately, in some cases are not receiving the care, the service that, we would expect for them. And that is really, really concerning, and does keep me up, because I wouldn't be human if it didn't.
I can imagine. And there's only so much in your role that you can influence as well, so there must be an element of frustration. Yeah,
there is an element of frustration, and I guess, and the government will be publishing the 10-year plan for the NHS in the next few weeks, and so it'll be really great to see that, because absolutely the NHS does need to transform. There's no other way to say it. It does need to transform. It is very different now, clearly, to when it was established 70 odd years ago. But the services we deliver have grown and grown and grown, but our population needs, our health needs are considerably different. And again, going back to, some aspects of our geography where we have parts of our population that live in deprivation, we have parts of our population that have multiple health issues. So whereas, 20, 30 years ago, you might have just been treating a person for one health issue, you now have these multiple health issues, which obviously needs a lot more resource. It needs different specialist services. It's sometimes not working for the patient because they need to see multiple people rather than being able to just see one person, etc. So it's this sort of, it's very complex, and it's certainly not something that can be changed overnight. But we absolutely do need to change it and think about it differently. And I think linked to that, and it's maybe a little bit controversial, but I think we all need to take more responsibility for our health and well-being and how we use and access NHS services. We did that really well in COVID because we really understood, and I don't know if some of that has been slightly lost. Notwithstanding, there are really vulnerable people in our community that really need that extra layer of support, but it's almost like we can't all have almost equitable access.
No.
Of course we do, because that's the whole that's the whole setup of the NHS.
But some people need it more than others.
Some people definitely need it more than others, and sometimes there is a sort of sense of entitlement from, I hear it when I spend a lot of time speaking to members of the public, to the patients we serve, and you hear some of that sometimes, that there's a sense of entitlement. And I think we've just got to all treat the NHS a little bit better ourselves and understand that in the main, colleagues are trying to do a really good job. They're driven by the desire to care for, to help, and to ensure people have the best possible outcomes. Yeah,
I agree with you about people having to take some responsibility as well. I think we can all do a bit more to just live healthier.
Yeah,
and there is a big education piece. Notwithstanding, like you say, there are people who are vulnerable and need that support. But I do think as well, people could just live healthier lives generally.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also comes back to the wider sort of, societal point. And again, how we genuinely support the parts of our communities that really need it.
Yeah.
As an example, there's lots in the media around access to dental care, which, absolutely needs addressing. But it's also shocking the amount of children in our region that don't have access to a toothbrush.
Because they can't afford a toothbrush?
Yeah, because either their family can't afford a toothbrush,
oh my God.
They live perhaps in a slightly chaotic family that doesn't support, healthy toothbrushing, etc. And it's those other aspects. Yeah, toothbrushes, toothpaste is the second most asked for item in most of our food banks now.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, how, for many of us, it's almost unbelievable, because to go and buy a toothpaste and a tube of, a toothbrush and a tube of toothpaste, a couple of quid at the most.
Yeah.
But for some people, that is absolutely massive. And again, sometimes I'll hear people maybe make flippant comments around, it's really easy to buy fruit and veg quite cheap. In Aldi at the end of the aisle, there's things for 29p. Not understanding that for many families in our region, they don't have a fridge, or they can't afford to turn the fridge on. They don't have a cooker, or they don't have the cooking skills. So it's about enabling people to have a more healthier lifestyle. And not making judgments about them. A big part of the work that we're doing at the moment Our biggest campaign has been around supporting people to stop smoking. Smoking is still the biggest cause of preventable death and illness.
Specifically in this region or
nationally,
UK, right?
But yeah, in this region. So yeah, it's
despite the growth in vaping.
Yes,
that's surprising.
Yeah, because we have, nationally, smoking rates have been falling, but we still have some stubbornly high rates in our patch, and not just amongst, lifelong smokers. We still have one of the highest rates of smoking in pregnancy, as an example, in parts of our region.
Gosh, so there is still that education.
Absolutely, the education piece is so important. Absolutely so important. And, you said about my role and my field in particular, and of course I would say this, but I don't think we as the NHS invest enough in the communications side of things, everything from, and actually, a wider level, because a lot of this is around education, as you just touched on, but it is supporting that behavioural change, which, as we know, is a long-term.
It takes time.
It does.
You don't just tell people once.
Absolutely. And we know from a lot of the insight work that we do that you touched on it before, but the NHS is enormous, so people don't necessarily know where they should go for what. Or so there's so much opportunity to provide more of that education and information. And I go back to what I said about system working and working with partners as well, because we can all play a role in that education. It's really so important. Again, something that really struck me recently, and again, I mean this with absolutely no judgment or disrespect, but we were doing some insight community engagement activity, and a lovely lady was speaking very passionately about how she'd bought an apple pie for her family because she thought that was a healthy option because it had apples in.
How much sugar?
Absolutely, but she just didn't understand that.
Yeah.
She genuinely thought she was doing the right thing for her family, and that's something for us all to own, isn't it? That's not an NHS issue. No. It's something for us all to own.
You clearly have a huge responsibility, and congratulations on all the success you've had throughout your career. It's clear there's a kind of theme coming through all the different roles you've had, which is this passion and this purpose. If you look back over your career to date, because you're still very young.
I'm not.
Is there one sort of sector or one cause that really stands out as almost your favourite to date?
Oh gosh, that's so difficult to answer.
Your current boss probably isn't listening. So.
I'm going to go with place marketing, which connects to another point that I was going to make, that I'm still proudly involved with bondholders, and I'm very proud and privileged to sit on the board of Future Humber, but I am going to go to that place marketing piece, because I think it's almost the foundation for everything. And just what I was describing in terms of some of the health inequalities that people in our region face, those can't be addressed by health services. They will be addressed by investment coming into the area, to having more jobs, to having better housing, to having better education. And you can't do any of that without having investment and pride in the place. So for me, that is really the key to everything. And so I think I would look back at my career and say, that has been probably my favourite part so far. Yeah. But I also think the job is far from done. And whilst I'm a very proud ambassador of our region, there is still so much more to do to put our region on the map.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you on that one, so thank you for that. Right, I'm just conscious of time. Let's just quickly then think about your career thus far. If you look back to, say, when you were leaving uni and you were perhaps still a little bit uncertain as to where you wanted to go, what advice would you give to that Anya now, knowing what you know now?
I think it would just be believe in yourself, explore the opportunities, try them out because it doesn't matter if they don't work, and just pursue what chimes with your values. Be driven and pursue what chimes with your values, I think, is the most important thing for me, and actually is something I do try to do.
It sounds like you've done that.
Yeah, but that would still be my advice, I think, to my much younger self.
So dare I ask, has there been any regrets or anything you would have done or would do differently now?
I'm not one to really use the word regret, because I think everything happens for a reason. And again, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I genuinely believe everything happens for a reason. And even if it feels like a mistake, as long as you capture the learnings from it, I think that's the most important part. There's probably part of me that, still wishes maybe my 20-year-old self had a career in New York or something, but that means that I wouldn't have had my family. So you can't see it as a regret, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
makes absolute sense.
I would say that I don't really have any regrets, and I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason, and to just seize the opportunities, find the opportunities, seize them, and usually something good will happen. And if it doesn't feel right, move on to the next thing.
And is there anything that you still really want to do that you've not yet had the opportunity to do, whether professionally, personally? Something on your bucket list, maybe?
Again, it maybe sounds a bit, I don't know if it's arrogant or how I'd describe it, but I just think there's still so much unfinished business for our region and putting our region on the map. And so that for me feels like something I would still, I am involved, but I would want to continue to be involved with.
Politics, maybe?
No, absolutely
really?
not.
I see you in that. Oh, you could be the next mayor.
No.
No, we can't tempt you. You'd be brilliant.
No, definitely
Okay, all right, that is a clear no.
No.
Okay, but still very much active in, as you say, putting this region on the map. Yeah.
Sometimes I think I would maybe like to do something in the charity sector,
right,
and or in education, but in a different way, particularly sort of secondary school. I don't necessarily mean being a teacher, but throughout my career, I've had too many conversations with young people where they just feel as if they're in a box and the opportunities aren't there. And I just think that is just something we're very fortunate. My son attends Ron Deering, UTC, and speaking to other parents, using that as an example, just the whole ethos, culture of that school and how supportive it is. I don't think my son would be where he is now if he hadn't have gone to that school. And so, and my point is, I think it makes such a difference, particularly at secondary school level and for certain kids that maybe aren't as academic. I think sometimes in mainstream education they can be a little bit sidelined.
Yes, I agree.
And absolutely, as I've said throughout, I believe everybody has immense potential and everybody can reach that potential. Yeah,
just need the opportunity. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in today. You are inspirational. You've had a very successful career, and I'm sure it'll continue to be even more successful. And thank you for finding the time to come in. I'm not going to let you go because I have a question that was left by our previous guest. You need to answer that before you can trot off to your event.
It's not too tricky.
So, the previous guest didn't know who he was leaving the question for. It's actually quite a good question for you, I think, having listened to your story. If you could learn a new skill immediately, what would it be?
Oh, this is great, because this is actually on my bucket list, and I should have said this. So I've got a very big birthday coming up this year, and my husband said, "What do you want?" And I said, "The only thing I want is piano lessons, because I've always wanted to play the piano." So that's exactly what my answer would be. Yeah.
Oh, well, how fortuitous.
Yes.
Then. And, a brilliant question. Thank you for answering it for us. Right, that's it. Thank you for joining us. We will be back next month with our next guest, but until then, I hope you enjoy the sun. Don't forget to put on your sun cream, and we will see you again next month. Until then, bye-bye.